Welcome to the Clearly Worthy podcast. Are you ready to embark on a transformative journey towards embracing your worthiness and creating extraordinary success? I am your host, Allison Lacusier, a certified professional coach, a professional speaker, and a female founder. As a passionate advocate for women's empowerment, I've dedicated my career to helping individuals like you unlock their true potential, cultivate unwavering confidence, and live a life aligned with their deepest desires. With years of experience in the coaching industry, I've witnessed firsthand the incredible transformation that occurs when we tap into our worthiness and step into our power. Throughout this podcast, I'll be your guide, sharing insights, tools, and strategies to help you navigate the path towards unshakable self-confidence and fulfillment. Drawing from my own journey as a successful business owner, I'll provide you with practical advice, actionable steps, and thought-provoking conversations with industry leaders. From overcoming self-doubt to setting and achieving audacious goals, we'll explore a wide range of topics designed to empower you to embrace your worthiness in every step of your life. Through these engaging interviews and solo episodes, I'll share my experiences, lessons learned, and wisdom gained from our remarkable guests who've achieved remarkable success in their respective fields. So if you're ready to leave self-doubt behind, step into your authenticity, and thrive as the empowered woman that you are, then this podcast is for you. It's time to claim your worth, align with your purpose, and manifest the success you desire. I'm thrilled to have you join me on this empowering adventure. Welcome to the Clearly Worthy podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Clearly Worthy podcast. I'm so excited to have this beautiful, amazing, talented guest on today. Melissa Turner, welcome to the Clearly Worthy podcast.
Hi, Allison. Thank you for having me. And thank you to everyone who's listening out there.
I always love to share how I got to know my guests and the first time I ever kind of experienced them. And the first time I ever met you was at Vanessa Emerson's event, Jumpstart, in 2021. And I just remember seeing you and thinking, wow, she is fabulous. Because as always, you were dressed to impress. You always have on the most like fashionable, like gorgeous outfits. And I just remember seeing you and being like, she is such a badass. So that was literally my first impression of you.
Well, that is a huge compliment coming from you. And it's one of these things, like I remember growing up, thinking, what am I going to be when I grow up? Middle school, high school. And I always liked fashion. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to incorporate fashion into whatever I'm doing. And here I am in dentistry. Like, and you say that, I'm like, yes, I did it.
You're somebody in my mind who has like a very strong personal brand, and I love it. Like every time I see you, I'm like, yes, you look amazing, and it's unique and it's different and it's like so fashion forward. So I just want to say I love that about you.
Thank you. I like that. Thank you. Made my day. Not gonna lie.
I love it. And so for those of you that don't know Melissa yet, she is 20 year into dental hygienist founder. She's a sought after executive consultant, a dynamic speaker, and a top millennial content creator. So she is behind some of the most, I would say, innovative, forward thinking brands in our industry. She is a needle mover. She is changing the industry. And so we're going to have an amazing conversation today about how she kind of got into this position, how she stood, in her own self, her own greatness, where she wanted to go, and actually started to make some really big and amazing changes in the industry. So I would love for you to kind of just share with the audience, like, who are you? Who is Melissa Turner today?
Well, we were just talking about it, Allison, even before the podcast started. We talked about, even who I am today in this month in 2024 is not going to be who I am 8 months from now, 9 months from now, So that question is always an interesting one, because I think a lot of times too, and this is way off topic, but I think a lot of times I don't understand, and this could be characteristic of a lot of women or just humanity in general, but I don't understand who I am in a moment until I can retroactively look back and be like, oh, that's what I was doing. That's who I was. That's the difference that I made. So very interesting question, but I would say in 2024, in the beginning of the year, who I am is someone who is just going for it. I feel like in the dental industry, as a whole. I feel like I've finally found my ground, found my footing. And so there's a couple different buckets that what I do falls into, but there's an underlying foundation that'll pull it all together. But clinically, I'm a hygienist. Haven't worked full time in the op in a very long time since my kids were born. You know, it's just hard to juggle that family, that full time mom and full time clinician role. And so I haven't worked much clinically for in the last decade. But as a clinician, that side comes out as when I speak on stage, influencing, thought leader aspect, that kind of thing. So that's one vertical that I do. The second vertical is just like you, I have founded multiple companies in the industry, some event companies, some award companies, consulting companies, and that's fun. That's just fun. Like there's something about creating something from nothing, really. Like there's magic in there. I was in a band for a while, and the art of making music from nothing and writing those notes down on paper and then playing all together and being able to perform it, just fascinating. So the founder in me I just love to create. So that's the second vertical. And then the third vertical is I spend most of my days actually behind the scenes working with product and service and technology companies on brand strategy, on company growth, on corporate consulting. And it's companies like Philips Healthcare, Patterson Dental. It's these companies and a lot of startups who come to me and say, hey, Melissa, I have this fantastic, amazing product. How do I get it in the hands of dental professionals, practice owners, and what kind of marketing and tactics and strategies do I use? And so I'll come alongside them and help them understand who we are in dentistry, which we're really unique. I know you know that, but our industry is very unique. So those three buckets kind of categorize me in a career role right now in 2024.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love it. And it's so funny, like coming into preparing for these podcasts and when I get to interview amazing women like you, I always let my intuition guide me. And sometimes I think, maybe I should really like dig in and like plan and like specifically what I want to ask. But it always works out because you just sharing who you are and what you're doing. There's so many lessons. There's so much knowledge from you just in sharing what you're up to in 2024. So I want to talk to you about boldness
Mhm.
because coming into 2024 and just going for it, one of the things that I hear a lot, especially from women in business or women who are starting to be entrepreneurs or women who own multiple companies, they have this limiting belief, I'll call it, that they're too multifaceted. Or kind of similar to what we're saying, like we have to fit into this box in order to make sense to the world. And something that you and I both have done that I think is different than potentially a lot of people in the industry is like we've gone wide and we've gone deep at the same time with a through line of the things that really matter to us. And so talk to me a little bit about that in your self-discovery of what is the mission that you're working on in the world? Who are you today? What is the biggest impact that you can make? How did you allow yourself, give yourself permission to really go after the things that matter to you?
Mhm. Well, it's a story. Everything is a story. And the older I get, the easier it is to look back and understand, oh, this happened, and then this was a result, this was the action, and this was the reaction. And it just, oh, that was chapter one. This is chapter two. Um, for me, my story as a woman, even before entering dentistry, was one of struggle. It was just as a kid, I was shy. I was raised in an area that didn't empower women. It was a very traditional, closed culture. And I never fit that box. And so growing up, it was very common for me to feel like if everyone was here, I was always the outsider. Like I never fit with their expectations. I never, they were always like, we don't know what Melissa's doing. We'll just kind of let her do her own thing, that kind of thing. Maybe the black sheep, although not in like a rebellion way, but just always different. I never fit the box of how I was, supposed to be growing up. And so I remember thinking, I don't need to go to college. like, who needs to go to college? This was back in the, early 2000s. I'm still, in a mindset where, why would I go to college? I'm going to be a mom and stay at home and have kids. But there was something in me that said, Melissa, there's more for you. And that's, I think, when I first started to listen to my intuition and my gut and really embrace who I was. And so I went to hygiene school, finished my undergraduate degree, started on graduate programs, and realized that me never fitting the mold growing up is really an asset, in a career. And so what that made me realize too is that I can make a huge difference. We talk about making a difference in the community. The biggest difference I want to make is to make positive change in whatever industry I'm in, whether I'm in plumbing or automotive or dentistry, who knows, but to make positive change. And for me, that's kind of the reason behind that has morphed throughout the years, growing up in a family that didn't necessarily empower women. Of course, now I want to empower women and say, hey, you got this, you can do this, no matter the trauma that you've had, it, no matter what your story is in the past, no matter how supportive you've been in the past, like, you've got this as a woman. And one of my favorite quotes that I said one time, and it's funny to quote myself, but in one of my speaker reel videos, I was being interviewed, and I said something about how, as women, we often feel like we have to do things alone as women in business, and we're not alone. And so just understanding that aspect of, we all have our story. We just have to go for it, and we don't have to do it alone, I think can get us far in our career, in our life. And now that I have daughters, I have two daughters, they're 9 and 7, and they are the coolest kids ever. Allison, like, that's so biased, but they are the coolest kids ever. But now that I have daughters, all I want to do is make the world a better place for them. And so it's all morphed, no longer it's not about my past struggle as a woman in life. Now it's about setting a foundation for my daughters and making sure they can succeed in whatever that means to them. They don't have to look like me or do what I'm doing, but in whatever path they choose to follow, I want to lay it out and say, yes, you will struggle, but you will also succeed.
Gosh, I love that so much. Uh, there's there is something that I think completely shifts from that perspective, because similarly, and I feel like a lot of women could resonate with that. We go down our journey because of a certain thing, something happened and we feel strongly because of it, or we feel passionate because of it, or we want to make a difference because of it. And it's so cool when we can actually zoom out of our life a little bit and remove the kind of emotion we experience around it and look at what's happened as just a polarization or a motivation for the opposite. So if we felt we weren't empowered as a woman growing up, then we're like, okay, that's great. I'm going to create an empowering environment for my family, my life, and my kids moving forward. So it's so beautiful. We talk about struggle a lot, and the struggle truly, and this is so cliche, but the struggle is really what morphs us. It defines us. It shapes us into this beautiful, complex, ever evolving being.
Mhm.
I think it's so powerful. So what have been some of the most challenging parts of trying to make a difference? When you were like, all right, I'm doing it. I'm going to be bold. I'm going to make a difference. What have been some of the biggest challenges you've faced on that journey?
I think the biggest system challenge that I've seen is just as a woman being taken seriously. And this is as a woman in business. Now, I'm just going to call it out, being a blonde, young woman in business who likes to laugh, right? All of those things work against me when I'm in a boardroom and I'm the only woman there, right? Which happens all the time. And so I think that's the biggest challenge for me over the years and looking back is, do I change myself to play the game, to fit the mold, to be taken seriously? Or do I just continue forward, and then whoever really understands me will be along for the ride, and I'll work with them and that kind of thing. It's one of these things. It's kind of a constant struggle because, even there for a while, I think probably early on in my dental career, I was taught that as a speaker, I needed to look like a man. I needed to wear a suit coat. I needed to have a shirt up to here, right?
Yeah.
I needed to not be feminine, wear my hair in a bun, like lower my voice and not,
Yeah.
like it's one of
Yes.
the, and like there's still plenty of women that do that, and that's fine if that works for you, and it probably does, but not you, Allison, but you listening. But I realized that there needs to be more femininity in business. And so I think at the moment that I realized that, I said, I'm just going to go for it. And, I love Lady Gaga. I'm like, I want to be Gaga of dentistry, right? Like, what kind of
Yeah.
crazy outfits can I wear, that are feminine, but still respectful, right? But I don't know, it's just one of those things where probably the biggest day-to-day struggle as a woman in business, and whatever industry I would have been in, this would have been the same, but is to be taken seriously as a blonde young woman who is feminine and likes to laugh, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I I've had people come to me after knowing them for a period of time and saying things like, "Oh, you're actually really smart." And I was like, "Hmm, interesting." Yes, like things like that where you recognize kind of coming in, and I love to dress like very feminine and very like I would say like pretty in a way. Like I like to have that like kind of like I don't want to say it's like a little girl look, but I like floral, I like dresses, I like poofy things, and I've had the exact same thing. And I've thought about it. I've thought about like maybe if I dress differently, people would treat me differently. But similar to you, I've thought I don't want to buy into that. Like I would rather become normalized that women get to be feminine and as they are in any business setting and still be taken seriously without having to push or prove or go through the hoops to be like, okay, fine, now she's accepted into somebody that we can listen to. So
Mhm.
how did you kind of in your own mind have that confidence, that ability to kind of be like, no, I'm just going to be who I am? Because I think that's a tough thing to do.
Yeah, I think it goes back to understanding that I don't mind being on the outside. And in fact, I mean, it's what we've talked about. It's that struggle. I think, and I say I think here, I think I might thrive in struggle, but I also don't know life without struggle. So if I wasn't struggling, maybe I'd really thrive. I don't know. But it also takes me back to, after I had my oldest 10 years ago. I was living in small town in Minnesota, dead of the winter, and I fell into this deep, deep postpartum depression. Right. So this is another example of struggle and how I realized, it lasted for a year, right? At least, right? If not more. Um, but it was out of that struggle that my career really took off. And so this is part of the reason why I think I thrive and struggle, and I don't mind being outside, and I don't mind being, oh, there's Melissa. She's like the feminine one. She's like not taken seriously sometimes in the boardroom and things like that. It's I think I think maybe I thrive in it, but it's one of these things I don't actually know. But what I know is, prime example, after I had my first kid, it was, am I going to live for tomorrow? Like, am I going to wake up tomorrow? It was that deep of a depression. And I remember when she reached her 1 year birthday, most of it just kind of drained from me and like fell off me. It was like, I remember she was in her high chair with the cupcake and like all like messy. And I realized, oh my gosh, she survived and I survived. And it was out of that time where I realized what I knew was I needed something to control. And so sometimes I would, because I felt so out of control, right? So even sometimes I would take a drive just because I needed to turn the steering wheel and feel myself turn, right? I needed that control aspect. And so that's really when I dove into my career and said, hey, what can I do? I can't work clinically right now. I can't work outside of the house because I'm birthing babies, I'm breastfeeding, all this stuff. But what can I do from home for my career that will make me grow and excel? And so it's out of that muck and mire and like shit of struggle where beautiful things I think can happen.
Ugh. I think that's important for us to all hear and know because, like, when we live in the world that we live in right now with social media and with, outward appearance is always seeming so perfect. It's really easy for us to look at someone else and be like, "Oh, must be nice," or must be easy for her, or this must have happened. But the truth is that the best things typically come from the hardest moments. Like that grit, that ability for you to rise and find yourself and find this next level purpose came from one of the hardest points of your life. And I think we have to remember that about people when we're looking at them from the outside perspective because we have no idea what's actually going on in their lives. Like we really don't. And coming onto this podcast, I've had a lot of women share some of the hardest things that have led to the greatest things. And so I don't think it's uncommon for that to be the case, but you have to make a choice. And that's exactly what you did. Instead of saying, like, why is this happening to me? Why me? Staying in that like almost like victim mentality, you're like, what can I do? What is the opportunity here? What is this next level for me with everything that's going on and all the things that I want? What is the thing that fits right now? And
Mhm.
that takes creativity. It takes thinking out of the box. It takes being a disruptor. And it back to kind of like your origin story, it takes being the type of person that is absolutely okay not following the status quo and actually creating something on their own, which is like the definition of an entrepreneur. So it's so powerful.
Definition of an out of control entrepreneur
Yeah.
keeps going and starting new things.
But it's such a beautiful way that we get to be creative when we're entrepreneurs and we're multifaceted. Um, so you are, like, in my opinion, and I think really well known in the industry as being kind of like that disruptor, like the innovator. Like we look to you to ask the question of like, what needs to change? What's coming next? What do you see? And so I want to ask all those questions. Like when you look at the future of our industry and what you're seeing, especially as a woman in business, like what needs to happen to change to make us better as an industry? And let me start with there. I'm going to start there. I'm not going to stack my questions. Let's start with that one. What do you think needs to change right now in our industry to make it better?
This is such a hard question, but it's also such an easy one, because I think about this every day. I mean, that's where
Mhm.
you and I are like in this kind of thing. That's why we are who we are. But I think what needs to change has already begun to change. Uh, you know, 20 years in the industry, there were a lot of changes that we knew were coming down the line, like more women graduating dental school. Like that's an easy thing. Millennials are going to be the rise of the workforce. Like that's an easy thing. But then there were changes that we didn't know were going to happen. We didn't really know that, Uber and the tech boom was going to take off like this. Just we didn't know that we were going to have Chat GPT and we could FaceTime people, patients. We didn't know those changes were coming. We also didn't know COVID was coming. And so in a lot of the lectures I get from stage, I often call these things out right away, or even base my lectures on these changes, because it's so important that as a community, as an industry as a whole, that we collectively acknowledge the change we're going through, because the amount of changes that we've gone through just in the last 4 years, even outside of COVID, but adding COVID to the mix, the amount of changes that we've gone through is incredible. It is like we've never seen this before, ever, as an industry. And so, yes, there's changes that need to take place, but I think the biggest thing right now is to understand that a lot of these changes have already started to take place. And now we have to understand how that's impacting us as a community and as business owners, as dental practice owners, as clinicians, as people who have dedicated our career to this industry. We have to acknowledge that these changes are taking place, first of all, and then try to understand how they're going to impact the future. In hygiene school, they went over, you know, after you graduate, a hygienist could be an educator, a clinician, a change agent. And I remember thinking, what the heck is a change agent? I have no idea what that is. Like, that just sounds dumb, right?
Yeah.
But like 20 years later, and I'm like, oh, that's who I am. Like, I see the change. I see the changes happening. I see the changes coming down the road. And I want to help everyone in the industry embrace those changes and move forward, whether they like them or not. So that's what I have for you with that question. I mean, there's a lot of changes that need to take place, but let's just
Yeah.
focus on actually the ones that are taking place right now and get through those.
No. That's such a good point. And I think all of us can feel it. It's almost like what you said earlier. Sometimes I actually just go through the photos on my phone to think like, where have you been and what have you been up to in these last like 6 months or 1 year? Because things are changing so quickly that you need to like find ways to kind of ground yourself into like, who was I 6 months ago? Who was I a year ago? Because of the changes of the universe that are happening in the world, we're adapting so quickly now that it's almost as if like like you said, it's never been this way before, that we have to kind of constantly find ways to ground ourselves.
And without looking back and understanding what we've been through, we can't understand the future. And I know you're a forward thinking person. I'm a forward thinking person. It's hard for me to understand how somebody could not be that way. But we have to study history, modern history, the past year, the past 3 years, to really understand where we're going personally, but then as a community too.
What do you think is the most important skill set or mindset that will help people navigate the future?
Adaptability, specifically for dentistry. Navigating this change. I walked in. This story is making me a little flustered because I can't believe it. And it's not even a big deal, but I walked into a dental office the other day. I was taking my kids there for their 6-month hygiene checkup, x-rays, that whole shebang, and had never been there before, had never met the dentist before. It was the closest one to my house that was in network, blah, 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 blah. Walk in, they don't know me they don't even know I'm in dentistry, right? Walk in, and the dentist was asking me what I do, and I told him what I do, and I was telling him about this amazing sealant product that I'm working with. It's revolutionizing the industry, and it's completely like, it can be used on rocket ships to help with temperature control, like waxing on the outside, and it is, NASA's using it, and we can use it for sealants, and it's just this amazing product. And so I was telling him about this product, and I said, you know what? I have samples at home. Do you want to just try it? You can put it on my kids and see, I'm looking for somebody to test it out, to beta test it, to make sure it works. He's like, oh no, I don't need that. And I'm like, why wouldn't you need that? He's like, I don't need that kind of stuff. I'm good how I am. And it made me realize that, not everyone is forward thinking. Not everyone wants to change, no matter how good the change is. Like, this product could revolutionize, it could save them time and money and create happier patients in his practice. And he didn't want anything to change. And it was a moment where it called me out, because I realized, I think that's how most people are like. Most people are in the bell curve where they don't want to change no matter how good, you know, it is. And so it kind of brought me down to reality a little bit.
I am similar to you in having a hard time. Like, and I actively strategically force myself to be like, what do other people think about this kind of thing? Because similar to you, I'm like better, bigger, expansive growth. Like, I love to see change. I love it. I actually thrive in change. But there are so many people that are like, the way somebody explained it to me this way, and I feel like it resonates so much, like where you went in there and you talked to this dentist and you showed him something that like really truly could, from your perspective, revolutionize his office and do all these amazing things. But from his perspective, it was like you were offering for him to have a bigger pool. So he has a swimming pool and he has a bigger pool. And he's like, no, but I have a pool. I don't care. I don't need a bigger pool. But that's not the point. Like, that's the way people look at it, but it's not the point. The point is that when we can be the kind of person that is always adapting and evolving, that means that we're never going to be behind. We're never going to look and be like, oh no, I haven't adopted this level of technology and now I'm behind and now it's actually really hurting my business. Because I've
Mhm.
seen this too, where I've gone into practices that used to be extremely successful and they just stuck with this one thing that made them extremely successful and did nothing else as the world has changed. And now they're like, help, we're so behind. Like, what do we do? And I'm like, that's the tough part. We don't want to be in situations like that where we're literally like striving to stay at the status quo. Like, if we're always thinking from the perspective of like, how do we help our patients more, how do we help create change better, then you'll always have the ability to continue growing with the changes of the world. So
You hit
I
you hit it on the head. I mean, I think that's most dental practices, I think right now, are stagnant. Sure, you have those who are ahead of the curve, the top 1% who are really doing what they can to adapt to the changes. And it's not just about bringing technology in, it's about mindset changes, right? But most dental practices now, and this is when I consult with practices, this is my message. This is what I say. We've done things a certain way for so long, and we've learned it from our mentors, from the education we went to, from the person who owned the practice before us. We've done this forever. We haven't changed, but the world has changed. And so that's what I mean by adapting. We need to understand, first of all, that the world has changed, and then realize that a disease-based model of care in a dental practice is not going to succeed in the future, right? For many reasons. And so we need to shift to a preventive-based model. And so if we can just start now adapting our mindset as clinicians or business owners or consultants to a preventive mindset, then that's going to take us far. But that's just one example of the adaptability that the industry needs now to succeed. Because I see so many dental practices who are stagnant, who are not understanding how to fill the holes in their schedule and retain their patients. But right now they're blaming it on, well, we're short-staffed, or this is a result of COVID. And I'm like, no, this is a deeper systemic issue of how the industry is as a whole. And this is why we have Allison and Melissa and the others who are instructing and telling you and then showing you, like what you need to change to move forward to be successful in the future. We could go on forever about that.
I 100% agree. It's funny when you're the type of person that gets excited by change and then you meet people that aren't, and you're like, what? Like, it's hard to think about it. But if anybody that's listening to this podcast that is feeling afraid by change, it's normal, because our brains are really hardwired to want to understand and know what's coming next. Even if what's coming next isn't great, people would rather know what's coming next than not know at all. And so a tactic or a strategy that I find really important is to actually imagine the best, because we are like hardwired or biased to look for the worst, because our bodies evolutionarily will make sure that we look for the threats, because that will save our life. But if we look for the good things, that means like we just get more food, essentially. So we have to train ourselves to really look for the positives or look for the great outcomes, and then just decide what that future could look like for you, because then you can be excited about it. So many people don't decide what they want, they decide what they don't want. They're like, I don't want that. I don't want this. I don't want that. But if you can be like, no, this is the future that I want and that I'm creating, you'll get so much closer to that.
And most are reactive versus
Yes.
understanding that they can be proactive. And I think this is one of the things I've learned as a business owner, is to be okay with rejection. Let's say I'm looking for sponsors for an upcoming event. I know that it's a numbers game. And this is what I've learned through my career as an executive in the corporate world. If I cold call 30 different sponsors, I know that one will get back to me and one will get back to me and actually become a sponsor, right? It ends up being a numbers game. And so then if you adapt that numbers game to everything else we're doing as business women, then it takes the emotional reactive response of rejection kind of out of the conversation. It's like, oh, okay, they said no, moving on, Or there's some books that will say, what was I reading? There was The Art of Negotiation. I was reading, I think that's what the book was called. And he said, actually, no is a good thing, because now you can say, okay, we know it's not going to work, so let's figure out how it can work for you now, versus a fake yes. But one of the things that when we talk about change, one of the theories that I go back to a lot, and this kind of aligns with what you were saying too, with the Stoic philosophers, the Greek and the Romans, they had a theory. They had three different aspects about change. They said, with types of change, there's change that you can control, there's change that you cannot control, and then there's change that you have influence over. And so that's something that has helped me so much in life, in any aspect of change. I always like change that I can control.
Yeah.
Right, I'm fine with that. That's fine. The change, but just understanding that there's change out there. There might be situations that I can't control. It helps free myself of that. And then the most fun is when I see situations where I'm like, I have influence over this change that's happening. And what do I want that influence to be? Do I want it to be a great influence, a small influence, a positive and negative influence? Like, so just identifying those three buckets has been really helpful for me too in business.
Mhm. I could totally see that because you're kind of like separating yourself again from like whatever that thing is, and you can categorize it and say like, okay, like what is the choice that I have here? And I think that's something that we all have to remember is like in any situation, no matter what it is, we always have a choice of how we want to show up, like make it different, get out of it. Like we get to decide that. And even though sometimes like in life we feel like, oh my gosh, like we can't, we don't get to decide anything, there are still like micro decisions inside of every single thing that happens that you can still have. So I think that's just so powerful.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Yeah.
What are you most excited for about the future of dentistry, of your life? Like, what is coming that you're like, this is going to be amazing and I cannot wait?
I think one of the lessons I've learned is there for a while in my career, I wasn't ready to be as public facing as I am. I wasn't ready to be, an influencer or on the stage because it takes a lot of vulnerability. I mean, this. Every time I put a post out or I speak or I'm on stage or something, it's just so much vulnerability that I have to kind of work through it and prep myself for it. And there for a while, I wasn't ready for that because I didn't feel good about myself mentally. I wasn't healthy, things like that. Um, and then there came a point several years ago where I realized I had been promoting and pushing a lot of brands, brands that I had built, come to the National Mobile and Teledentistry Conference, right? Come work with this company, come work with this company. And so I was spending my days kind of pushing brands. And there came a point where I realized it's time to push myself as a brand.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've realized since doing that, and that was a journey, like I had to get to the point where I was okay with being in the public eye, where I was okay with everything that comes with that. But once I started doing that, I realized that's what people want. In an age of chat GPT, of fake influencers, of the Kardashians, they want authenticity in a human form. And so since pushing myself as my brand, I've realized like that's the easiest thing ever because I'm just being myself. And sure, I'll have the haters,
Yeah.
that's fine, right? Just kind of detach from
Yeah.
that. But so what people want in the future, I firmly believe is authenticity. And I always say this, like chat GPT is never going to replace a human voice. No matter the comments that you see on LinkedIn that are made by chat GPT, like you can tell the articles that are written by chat GPT, you can tell. And there's nothing that will replace the human voice because we have quirks, we have nuances, we have things that chat GPT will never ever say. So it's that authenticity that is really going to come through in the future. And I think that's what I'm most excited about for the industry, the community, for society as a whole, for me personally, is for us to realize, okay, since 2009, we've had iPhones and like everything's gone social media and virtual. And now the pendulum's going to swing back and we're going to realize, oh, what does human authenticity really look like in communication and marketing and business relationships and things like that?
I could not agree with you more. And I'm so excited that you said that. Because I hear it a lot. Like people are so scared of what's to come with ChatGPT and maybe feeling this level of like, will I still be relevant? And my answer is yes, as long as you are yourself. The more you can be yourself and really align to actually who you are, the easier your life gets, truly. Like it's not easy to be an influencer and it's not easy to be in a public eye, but it's easy to be yourself. And
Mhm.
it's that's when people are like, what do I post on social media? What do I like? What do I say? What do I do? I'm like, what is in your heart? Who are you? What do you want? What is your skill set? What is your gift? Like the sooner and faster that our world can really collectively, and I keep hearing that the world is going through this like awakening. Like there's a collective awakening where people want more real in a world where there's more and more artificial. The faster you can become the most like the USD you, the most aligned version of you, I think honestly and truly the more successful you'll be,
Mhm.
easier.
Mhm.
Because you just have to lean in and just like you being bold this year and being your own advocate and choosing your own brand and like who the hell is Melissa Turner and how is she going to influence and change the world will create like a this massive success storm for you because that's exactly what people need right now. So I'm just like over here cheering you on and so excited for you because I think we all need
Let's
to
do
hear
this.
this. We need to hear it.
Yeah. And it's, it's one of these things where my 9-year-old right now is asking for, an Apple Watch. And she's like, when can I be on social media? Because she sees me on it all the time because that's my
Yeah.
job. If it wasn't my job, I wouldn't be on it, right? Um, and and it's one of these things in thinking, how can I best help my own kids in a generation, below millennials? Like what are they? Generation Alpha, I think is what they're called. Um, what I've been teaching them is, they're only allowed to have 1 hour of screen time a day, whether that's watching TV or reading a book on the screen. I mean, that's more for their eyes. So their eyes don't go crazy. But
Mhm.
one of the things that's most important for me to teach my kids and to teach that younger generation is the art of human communication, of looking somebody in the eye and
Yes.
working through struggles, is empathy, it's relational intelligence, it's emotional intelligence. And I don't think that's going to be lost in the younger generations, but I think it's going to be something that might be uncommon in the younger generations until the pendulum swings back and we realize that spending so much time on screens and on social isn't as good for us as we thought or whatever like that.
Mhm.
So I keep telling my kids, I'm like, when you're 35, you're going to thank me for only allowing you to be on 1 hour a day because
Yes.
you're going to be successful. Your relationships are going to be so much better. You're going to enjoy life better than somebody who's always like this. So I don't know how I got on
Yes.
that topic, but there you
No,
go.
but I think it ties back into as well, like the soft skills.
Yeah.
What people used to look at skills in business as like fluffy or soft, those are the skills that are becoming more and more important. And when we're like looking at like the future of like managers and leaders and organizational kind of visionaries, those people are going to be really like very, very tuned in to human needs and addressing human needs and understanding them because we have technology that kind of can operate and facilitate a lot more than it used to. So it's tapping back into those, like I would call them feminine skill sets in business, which is exciting to see more female leaders stepping into the boardrooms, being taken more seriously because they are feminine, because those are the skill sets that people are going to need and want as the future continues to go.
Yeah. Being an executive is not about power anymore. It's not about being in control. It's about being able to help your team and your company navigate through the human, intricacies that are out there. The robots can do everything else, and we've got
Mhm.
to, help navigate. So everything's changing, like you said. And I think you're right that it's a more feminine approach. Yeah.
I love it. I just want to honor you for being you, for showing up in the world as you are. And you've infinitely inspired me, probably without even you knowing it, which is which is a really fun thing because you just being you is, I think, inspiring so many people. I love to see the changes that you're making into the world. And if anybody that's listening wants to connect with Melissa, learn more about what she does, be a part of the change, how can they get a hold of you?
The best way, I mean, I have a website, melissakturner.com, and that will go to my team and then they'll send it to me. But faster ways are probably through LinkedIn or Instagram. The Tooth Girl on Instagram, Melissa K. Turner on LinkedIn. or just visit my website. But either way, and then if you see me, I'm at tons of dental conferences. So if you see me there, definitely stop and we can have a drink, maybe some bourbon or something. Just a glass of water. But bourbon is good too.
I love it. Definitely. It's been so good having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. Please reach out to Melissa, at least like go and follow her on Instagram because you get to see some of the amazing things she's up to. And thank you so much for being on the Clearly Worthy podcast, Melissa.
Thank you, Allison.